Okay. We will start in the usual manner with a moment of silence and the pledge, and again, calling the meeting to order. So if you could stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. If you could turn and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you all for coming to tonight's work session. Things will be a little bit different tonight. This is a work session. It is not a regular meeting. There will be no business discussed or business that happens other than talking about the landlord and tenant rights ordinance that's on the tabled on the docket. This evening, this is council's work session. I think we will allow the public to have a portion. I think there probably will be an appropriate time in which the public will also be able to participate, because I think we'll accomplish more if we're kind of working together to solve this. But at the end of the day, it is all of the people sitting here, excluding me, their meeting, their work session to discuss things. For the people sitting at the table, I did want to talk about some of the formalities when we do go back into session. Is that piece of legislation at this point is yours. It is on the table, or it's tabled, but when it comes off the table, the wording in that document is the wording that you're voting on. If you don't like something in it, that's what you should be discussing. And if you guys want to, you are the ones responsible for writing the words and making the motion to change the wording of that. Because at the end of the day, again, excluding me, you are the legislators. I only get to break ties. But if you want something changed, it's this group and individually sometimes responsible for making the words that change that, because ultimately when it gets passed, we are this body's who passed it. So any sort of thoughts before we move into, do you want it open? Do you want to have the public talk first?
Well, I'll just say that I think we need to leave the one that's out there, just let it go and die. It's got, what, 2 amendments onto it already, and we'd have to amend it at least another time to get it even close to what the new one that we've just had. So I would rather let that one die, pull it off the table, let it die, and then start with the one we're working on tonight. It's much cleaner, has more of the information that we need in one in it, and go from there.
Have to kill it, or can we make this the original one and go with the second reading? That's too much been changed on it.
It would certainly be easy to pull it off, the one that's there, off the table, and then let it die and reintroduce something else. That would be a clean, Robert's Rules of Orders, procedurally a decent way to do that. The way you're talking about is possible, and it would require an amendment to, or basically a motion to change or alter the entire document, which then I think that looks a little bit shady, and might not be as.
I think we just go with the new one and just give it 3 readings and go from there.
And that is a risk.
As long as, I mean, there's still a point or 2 in there that I have a question about, but.
And that could be very well a risk for the public, was that if we all of a sudden change it, you are still on the 3rd reading, and it would require action that evening. Right. Where if you kill it and then reintroduce another one, you can have another 3 readings. Gives the public a chance to look at it. They're not going to feel like they've been duped, right, or something's been like switched underneath their, right. So that's a possibility.
Hey, Bob, when you say rewrite it, we can still start with this.
Well, we just got a new one.
Right, but it's basically the same thing with just a few.
Well,
you're not talking about starting from square one.
Well, no, I'm not.
Okay.
But that being said, I might as well say my piece and get it over with. We've got the International Building Code. We've got the Ohio Revised Code. We've got our own code here. And what we've done is we've just kind of added words and added sections and added phrases and turned it from Essentially, we need one paragraph, and this is just my feeling. We only need one paragraph. That's what we really want to do with it. Because the only real change in this thing is taking it, I mean, actually, the international code, I read through that, and that's a $350 fine, so that's higher than ours. And then we want to change it from civil to criminal, so that's the paragraph I'm talking about. But the thing that bothers me maybe more than that is that we've got no one to enforce this. We don't have anyone licensed to do what this says it's going to do. We're going to have to hire someone outside, and they're going to charge us to do it, more than we're going to collect if we take this clear through the court.
And in that case,
And what are you basing that statement?
I'm basing it on that someone having to get that certification takes up to 3 years.
It does not take up to 3 years.
Has anybody done it or passed it or?
We have a city employee who has taken the course and is waiting to take the final test.
Okay, well, then I suggest that we even hold the whole thing off until we have somebody to do it. This is like getting the cart way ahead of the horse. Once we got somebody to do it, that we don't have to pay someone to do that inspection, then let's go at it. But until then, why should we put something on the books that we don't have anybody to enforce?
We do have people that we can hire to do the test.
Right, but we got to pay them, Don, and we're in financial emergency.
Correct. But if you collect $250, that will probably pay the inspection.
Not from what I've been out checking around. So that's, even if it is $250, that's a wash. So at the same time, the whole deal behind this was, we're going to have somebody in zoning to do it. Until they got their license and can show it to us, you're never going to get my vote on this, because the cart is way in front of the horse. Because you're relying on the fact that they're going to get it. Well, I'm in the insurance profession, and not everyone passes those tests. I mean, back in '90 when I took mine, I guess it was easier because I know I'm not that smart. But now it's pretty tough. Same thing with securities. People that take the securities test now have a hard time passing them. So I would rather we have somebody on board to do it and then finish this up. And like I said, we really only need one paragraph. We're changing from civil to criminal. But we got a whole doggone ordinance to do it.
That would be a very complex paragraph.
It's all in the Ohio Revised Code. There's hardly any changes from the Ohio Revised Code to our ordinance in our code. I mean, there is, don't get me wrong, but there's hardly any. There's not enough that's going to matter for enforcement purposes that I can see. When you add messy or something like that, you know, there's my 5 words that I've used before. That's all I see in there is just those things that we've like tweaked it just a little bit, which is okay. We should tweak it if it's ours, but to do a whole thing, why don't we just do it as what it is? Change it from civil to criminal, get it over with, and wait till we got somebody to enforce it. So, because we don't.
Person be a full-time employee, that's all he would do, or is that something, another job title that he'll be
The full-time employee who's already in the compliance department.
get the certification. One thing I would point out, I'm viewing this from the tenant perspective, who's going to be the least savvy of the 2 people under the contract. And it seems to me that a tenant could go to this ordinance if we passed it and have an understanding of what their rights and responsibilities are versus going to a U.S. code and an Ohio code. And we all know that those are very lengthy and very difficult to comprehend. Probably a lot of whereas and legal speak. So I do see a benefit that a tenant could get this document from our ordinances and have a pretty good understanding of what their rights and what the proper procedures are if they have a complaint.
Are you saying a higher revised code is lengthy?
I believe anytime you go to Ohio Revised Code, it can be lengthy and it can be difficult for someone to maybe,
Digest.
comprehend if it's not something they deal with on a regular basis.
A lot of the references to higher revised code in here are pretty easy to understand, 1 and 2.
You misunderstood me. What I'm saying is, if this did not exist for a tenant to go out and research the standards at the state and federal level.
Where you just basically like Google it.
Right,
and
they would have to
start-
search that themselves, where I just look at it from a tenant. If they're in town, they can go to our ordinances and see that a lot of this, I agree with Bob, a lot of this is restating Ohio Revised Code with a little bit of tweaking. But I do see a benefit to a local person who isn't savvy in contracts or or how to research the law could go to this and it could benefit them.
We already have resources available, like in the form of a brochure that kind of, in layman terms,
On those down in
is
compliance?
informational right on the city's website. There's landlord tenant rights. I think it's from the Greater Community Action, the old WSOS. Like they have it in brochure form. That's pretty simple to
Navigate?
decipher and figure out what needs to be done as a tenant if you're in those situations.
Okay.
They're right on the front page of the city's website, and I think that they have them outside of the courtroom here, the clerk's office as well. And that's my whole thing, like these procedures and regulations already exist, but there's also already I don't want to say dumbed down version, but there's already versions out there that are accessible for people to reference without having to look up our codified ordinances or the ORC. Like a simple Google search would reveal it.
Well, I'll give you an example. Under number 14, third page in, or second page in, it says, number 14, comply with the rights of tenants under the Service Members Civil Relief Act 117, Statute 280, 2835.50, USC, Application 501. Can anybody tell me what that is? I can't. I didn't look it up. So if it needs to be in there, then we need to do footnotes, attachments, the same with the next paragraph after that. It says tenant obligations, reference ORC 5321.05. Then we need to put 5321.05 from the Ohio Revised Code in with this, make it a footnote so that people can cross over and see what it means. We're worried about tenants not being able to figure this out, but we're making it hard for everybody because we're referencing things and we're not giving them the reference.
You misunderstand. The reference under tenant obligations, reference ORC 5321.05, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 are directly out of Ohio Revised Code, reference 5321.05. That paragraph
Correct.
is almost verbatim from the Ohio Revised Code, and that's the reference so that you can look at it to see it.
And I would also add that adding the ORC would add additional confusion because the parts of the ORC that are in here, but it's not as a whole. So parts of it, you can look at the ORC and see, okay, but other parts of it are different than the ORC, so you can't really look at the ORC to reference that because it's
Just like
rewritten.
like the mayor just said, though, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 are right from the ORC.
So why would they need to reference if it's verbatim in our
Well,
ordinance?
Yeah, you would need to reference it, but why don't we reference number 3, that's a city portion? This is a city clarification then,
Because
rather
this
than just
all
throw it in there.
becomes the city. It all
Yeah,
becomes,
it's all gonna become city.
so you wouldn't really need to reference the ORC, you would just need to look at our own ordinance.
Well, like I said in the beginning, if it's pretty much mirrors it, we only need one paragraph.
Separate the stuff that you're talking about? Separate out what the city's doing compared to the ORC? Is that what you're aiming for, a separation of the two? Like what the city's wanting to do compared to?
Yeah, what additions or deletions did the city do compared to the ORC? And that's a good example, Don, number 3. I knew that, I had it marked, but I forgot because I thought, my note was this section doesn't read the same as the ORC, and it's number 3, that's the one we've added.
And even though it mimics it, it's not word for word.
No,
We've altered it slightly.
Why don't you just take the Ohio Revised Code and codify it into city ordinances?
Right.
Put our own penalties in it to it, then it's controlled here. It's one of the suggestions that actually landlords made when they were here at those meetings last year. They suggested we take the ORC and codify it about landlord tenants, right? And just endorse that Ohio Revised Code because there's no really fighting the Ohio Revised Code, and just codify it into as a city ordinance. If there's other things that then you want to, add to it, then add to that, but start with the Ohio Revised Code and go from there.
I think that is what comes down to the paragraph, just saying this is, referencing like all of
right,
this.
let's not just
And then
stick it
here's
in the
our
middle.
penalties.
Let's just stick it in the middle, or if we're gonna stick it in the middle, let's parenthesize it or something to say, this is our portion of it. Is that what you're saying, Eric? We could take the ORC and just codify it, put it part of our ordinances.
Yeah, no, there's
If we want to
something,
change anything, we can change
if
it.
there's something additional that is, similar to the Ohio Revised Code, but we think, there needs to be tweaked a little bit, then you can add that as part of adopting the Ohio Revised Code of how we're gonna, help protect not only tenants, but landlords from tenants that they're having issues with. It's right in the revised code, so do that first and then
Well, this thing goes both ways,
And
that's for
build from there.
sure. It protects landlords too.
it does, and the ORC does, so does this, but why don't you just start with the ORC and then if there's some changes that need to be made later on, but at least you have your starting point that you can at least agree on, because that's revised code, it's
Yeah.
in there to protect everybody.
I mean, that's what the judge can enforce. We start adding too many things, I don't know. I mean, not that the side yard's a big deal, number 3, but
Yeah, there's suggestions and reasons why some of those don't exactly to apply to some of the places here in town, and we can, at least as a jump off point.
So if you were to do as you're proposing, would you cut and paste the whole section of the revised code, or would you just reference that section of the Ohio Revised Code and then say, and then these additional issues, local issues?
that's what I'd like to see. Let's take
Very
the whole
simple.
revised code, and if there's changes we want to make, we'll go back and say, put that number 3,
Things that apply here that we've had issues with,
right,
then it's still most likely referenced somehow in the Ohio Revised Code. Speak here, then an addendum, something at the bottom of that
Right.
ordinance can say that
one-page addendum, these are the things that Fostoria, that's,
at least it's something that everybody can agree upon, because we all agree that we're all gonna follow the Ohio Revised Code anyways, but we put it in our ordinance and have our own penalties attached, then, the penalties end up, staying in the community to maybe help do something else. help us to enforce those codes.
How is that really any different than what you have in front of you?
Because we've just stuck them in there. I would like, and personally, I would like them to be like Eric just said, let's make an addendum to it. Here's Fostoria, what we feel we need to do, rather than stick them in. Because I think that way we know going into it that it is the Ohio Revised Code and we're adopting it. And then we're adding our things onto it at the end. I mean, it's the same thing as in a book. They footnote if they do something or reference something. Where in here, we've stuck them in there, which makes for better reading, but it doesn't make for clarification if somebody's got an issue. There's not that many. I mean, the last copy, we just got 6 things in red. Everything else was pretty much already done. So if we just pulled the ours out of there and put them on the last page and say this goes back to this section, because it's all, now we've got it all numbered in order correctly. It won't be hard to, say where our particular local ones would be. I like that idea.
Don, what's the timeline on the city employee for their final test? When does that take place? And
If you pull this back off of the docket and give it 3 more readings, that individual should have their license by that time.
And I have a question. I have a question just about this process that isn't related to whether we start with this document or whether we do a whole new one. But I have one question about when a complaint is filed, or somebody files a complaint against a property and they go out and they look at it. If there's something that the landowner needs to correct, do they have an opportunity to correct that before a citation is issued?
Yes.
30 days.
Well, it's a variety of things. It's according to what it is. It's like, if it's a grass issue, then it's either 3 or 5 days.
Okay.
And then trash is 3 or 5 days. And so each one of those issues.
Has its own timeline that goes with it. And so that was a whole idea of the red card being issued, because red card isn't a citation. It's just to make the property owner aware, because there's a lot of issues with people saying they hadn't received the warning notice before they got cited. So one of the ways around that was to have just a red card somewhere in the yards with the photo taken of the property and the issue, so that there was proof that at least that was staked there on that property to make someone aware that there was an issue before there's ever a citation issued. There's always a chance of trying to get some remediation to it before.
Those citations come from a city employee going around and seeing trash laying there and then cite them, or does it have to wait for a complaint from a tenant?
No, so there's a lot of different forms. There's calls, there's emails, we get calls from city council people. Sometimes different members of our crews will see things when they're out and report it. So there's a variety of ways things get reported to the zoning office. And I know last year at some point, Jeff had created a complaint form that lives on the website, and people can then report things to the zoning office. But yeah, there's a variety of ways that they get reported according to who happens to have an issue. But a lot of it is generated from someone in the neighborhood with an issue with what's going on with a property in their neighborhood.
Would it be fair to say there's a lot of grass mowing?
It's about to happen really soon where there's gonna be a lot of yards not mowed.
Now, when we charge for that through the zoning department,
Yeah.
does that come back through the court at all?
It's according, it's like, that particular one, a lot of times ends up attached to the taxes if those aren't paid.
And I guess I was curious on we got the annual report of the court last time, and I was just curious, the monies that came to Fostoria under city ordinance was 20,000, but under zoning was 2,600. So we didn't nail anybody too hard on zoning, evidently.
Well, I think you have two different issues there.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
it's two separate things. I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
and we had a report put together, that Jeff was working on for over the last several years, just how many complaints were answered, and we're hoping to get that information to you here before very long. How many citations were issued? What happens once they get here, that's a whole nother thing that you need to talk to someone else about.
I mean, the majority of the cases where they get red carded, they correct them, they fix them, so they don't end up coming to court.
Yeah.
I mean, the system is working.
And there's
And we're citing both landlords and tenants and homeowners. We're not discriminating against anybody.
a pretty decent relationship with the landlords and try to give them a chance. I don't know if, that where we try to give them a chance to, even before they get a red card,
Right.
to get it taken care of, because they may not know what their tenant is doing.
Sure.
And we
Well,
give
and
them
there's
the
a lot of
opportunity.
changes going on in the landlord scope in the city too. I know I spoke with somebody over the weekend. They said there was 14 properties that transferred from one landlord to another.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on right now. I think there's 2 or 3 landlords are getting out of the business right now, and there's at least one that's really been active in town.
And quote unquote, they're going to better landlords is what I heard.
Well,
Not always probably, but I mean, there's no
we
classification.
haven't had, so the
Every property's different.
like the person that has been buying things lately, we haven't had a lot of issues with so far. So you can make your own judgment on that. But yeah, the whole idea of zoning is not so much chasing the fine, it's to get the issue taken care of before it ever has to go to court. That's the real win about having zoning, is to get the cooperation before it ever makes it that far. I don't want to go around. We don't want to mow people's yards.
Well, and part of it too was we needed to put what those fines were in here. Because if they come through zoning and they get to the court, it's kind of at the will of the judge, right?
Yes.
Still is the way it's written.
So, like I say, I'm back to one paragraph.
In addition to the Ohio Revised Code.
This should be codified. There's no
So-
doubt about it.
Yeah, it seems that
That's the real change, is in the criminal.
it's just the
it's civil to criminal.
presentation of the document. I'm not sure that I see the cart before the horse in regard to the inspection, only because now I'm hearing there's probably going to be a heads up, then there's a red card. Then if there's no follow through, then there could be a citation. And then you have to have 3 citations, is it? Before you're going to trigger inspection. So, when we roll this out, the first week, we're not going to need to be doing inspections. So I'm not sure that I think it sounds like they're working on it. They're really close. We'll be there. And then we are going to have to go through 3 more readings. So,
Should there be a time limit on the 3 citations? Because as is, it's just 3 citations.
It says in 1 year period.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
no?
It's not in there.
Is it? That was the idea, wasn't it? In a 1 year
It
period.
could be put in.
I think that would be good.
I think that's definitely needed.
I think you're probably thinking the year when they talk about the cost.
Yeah, when
charge.
the escalation of the fines
talk about
is in a 1 year period.
year.
I actually thought that whole thing was based on any 1 year period.
Any objections to questions? Go for it.
Bill, why don't you speak to the microphone, because this is recorded for
Yes,
Yeah,
minutes.
and go ahead and
purposes.
introduce yourself for the first time and then.
Bill Sayer, 301 South Main Street. Thank you guys for meeting. I actually had meetings with several of you, which I think were very productive. Uh, Did have a question, and actually I had some other things I wanted to discuss, but the question is what you guys were just discussing as far as the citations. I did not think to ask this prior. It's 3 citations. There are times when you get taken to court. It could be parked vehicle, and is it possible to get 3 citations in one there you are inspection? That's a thing I never asked and I didn't think to ask, so that's my question. Prior, I didn't think about it. You guys were just discussing it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is possible to have 3 separate charges on a given day, but I think the idea was 3 separate occasions. Yeah.
The reason I was asking.
Yeah, because it is possible there's 3 different charges on one property in a given time. You're right.
Is that 3, does that trigger an inspection?
I don't think that was the intention. I think the intention was three separate occasions at that same property with citations.
Probably need to clarify that in our
Yeah,
Fostoria
clarify.
section.
What's this land bank that we get in Seneca County Land Bank? Like I see the resolution last week was for the Sandusky Street property for land bank. That's owned by the land bank or is that owned by the city?
Currently owned by the city, being transferred to the land bank if you approve it.
Now, the land bank's gonna be responsible for mowing and everything, or that would still be the city's?
Well, see, we mow for the land bank, and then we turn a bill in to the land bank, and they pay us per property that we mow for the land bank.
We might be moving off topic at this point,
Yeah,
I just want to try to
unless
get
it has to do with
educated.
landlord tenant stuff.
yeah.
And then they'll sell it, right?
Hopefully they'll be able to sell it. Yes. That's the whole idea of land bank, is to take properties that hadn't had taxes paid on for a long time, had a lot of different issues, get them into the land bank so that they can get it into someone's hands who could get it back on the tax rolls and be productive again, whether it's a neighbor or someone else buying it. Yeah, right now it is meant to, at least when there's a house still on it, that it's meant for someone who would buy it to live in it for at least, I think it's, can't remember if it's 3 or 5 years when they sign a contract with the land bank.
And adjacent landowners usually have first choice.
Usually anyone contiguous gets the first choice, and the first one that put their name in with a deposit to the land bank is generally who would get the
So I think I've
choice.
heard enough about the land bank to know that that's not anything to do with the
Right.
landlord tenant rights
Yes.
legislation, since a landlord is not able to purchase that, and they would not be a tenant if they purchased it. So we need to not talk about that more.
Get back on the complaints. Can that be done by, like, fire department goes in there?
Yeah.
That, they can make a complaint.
Yeah.
Policeman goes in there, they can make a complaint.
Yes.
Okay.
City street workers can,
Yeah.
which they're the people that are out there all the time up and down everywhere. So they're gonna,
Yeah, and ideally, if you put this into play with the Ohio Revised Code, then you would hope that for the protection of the tenants, if say that they have an issue, that they're able to, get some help with an issue, and vice versa. If someone's tearing up the landlord's property, then so it protects potential protection of everyone.
this goes into effect in whatever version it is, do you see another one coming down the road? It's going to be for owner occupied with the same,
That's a good question. I don't,
or do we have enough?
I think the majority of that's already covered in city ordinances.
But doesn't that cover all houses then? That's where I get hung up on. We already have our city ordinances for those things for homeowners, but it also covers landlords and tenants. Should we take our penalty here and amend our current zoning ordinances to reflect the same penalties?
I think you have different situations between landlords and tenants than you do with homeowners. And I think, especially in today's world, both landlords and tenants have to have rights to protect them. You can ask, we only have one landlord in the room, I think, but Bill, would you be willing to comment on how difficult it is at times to remove a tenant?
Can be very difficult. Can be very difficult, but it's not. I mean, it's a process. It takes a process like anything.
How does this change that process?
There are some concerns that I've had. I actually met with Don and Eric at a pretty productive meeting. There are still some concerns about as far as going after the problem instead of the property. You're running into a few things as far as I don't know how much it'll actually change the process of actually going through the court. It makes it to where it incentivizes going away from having a property that's a continual problem. There are active lawsuits. I do want to point that out in not active, settled lawsuits in Findlay, Ohio. To where, and I've had issues, and I know other landlords have had issues as far as tenant property is different from my property. I have had issues, but there was a lawsuit actually filed and completed in Findlay where a landlord was, I don't know if it was over targeting, but they were telling him you have to get rid of these things, and it's trash as far as messy or whatever. You have to get rid of these, and I think it was tires or something stupid. And they ended up taking him to court. He ended up getting fined over it. At which point he ended up going back and saying, I can't get rid of tenant's property. If it's on my property, I cannot forcibly take that property. I could be charged with theft. And I've had an issue arise before, and Danielle, I'm sure, can speak on it too, where things come up. And she's good at communicating. And you do have time to remediate often. But where was I going with this? I've had an issue before where I had a neighbor complaining that there was trash on the one side, and I was trying to get people out. They kept saying they would be catching up, but they tried to play games with you. But there was a bunch of trash on the one side of it. The neighbor complained. It had been sitting there for weeks, and it was a bunch of boxes with newspapers and stuff in it that we got rained on and everything. Went down there, and then I was like, okay, well, we're just going to throw this away. And then suddenly, I'm getting accused of, oh, you're a thief. You're a thief of this and that. And I'm like, it's newspapers and garbage that was sitting out. And the thing that really pissed me off is the neighbor that was complaining to zoning was then going back, oh, I got him. I'm like, well, what the hell do you want me to do? You want it clean or do you want it? So it gets frustrating on my end. I feel like I rambled around the question there. But if there are processes, zoning will work with you. This isn't a bad thing. After meeting, I'm much more comfortable with it than I was prior. I met with Sue too, and I should have met with more of you, but just busy. There is a potential of this. You guys are bringing up, when you guys brought up the complaints, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but complaint form, Don gave it to me. It's something Jeff produced. I think this would solve any zoning problems whatsoever. Jeff is excellent downstairs. This right here would solve any issues with zoning, anybody saying, oh, you're targeting me, anybody, whatever, if they're getting mad, it would solve all complaints against zoning, I would imagine, to where I have one right now. I actually had to talk to my lawyer today because it's like beating my head against a wall. They're upsetting their neighbors, but and I tried talking to them about it, and they're like, well, show me the law, show me the law. And I'm like, they're trying to work with us. You're making it a big thing, like they're targeting you and this and that. Just work with them. But this solves that, because it can't be, oh, I'm getting picked on. It's like, no, you're being a bad damn neighbor. It would solve all of your problems, just formalizing the process. I should have made copies of this for all of you. You're more than welcome to pass it around if you want. But there's potential in this. There's potential in this legislation to actually have Fostoria leading on something and showing how it should be done. There's some vagueness in there, and it needs a little work. That's it. But, I rambled there. You guys continue. I'm sorry.
You invited the chief up here. Did you want him to?
I invited the fire because I just wanted him, we don't see all the properties. And he walks in the properties, so I talked to him today on the phone, and I just wanted his view of what he's seeing in the city. And now you say that the chief can even go to places and make a complaint. And I know if you wanted to get up and talk about what you see. Yeah, I mean.
Chief Jason Root, Fostoria Fire Department. Yeah, well, I mean, we obviously be going properties for a little bit of everything as far as that goes. And we do file complaints. And then if we do see structural issues, any immediate safety hazards and stuff like that, we have issued serious hazard orders from the fire marshal's office. And then we have to cite them, and everything else, follow the rules through the whole entire thing. So there's a big process to do it. The hardest part we have is the overall process of getting completion of some of this stuff. Some people kind of pass it on. Some people get on it right away. I think the biggest issue that we're seeing with what you guys are doing with the residential side of it all is you have the occupants and then you have the owners of the property. Sometimes these occupants are messy, to say the least, and they don't take care of the property. The problem is when the owner doesn't keep up with keeping that property where it needs to be. It's almost like it's my second home. I should be taking care of it the same way I live in my primary home, to a certain level. I'm not saying it's going to have to be as perfect, but it certainly should be as livable as what it could possibly be. Where we have the biggest issues are keeping up with primary, utilities and stuff, making sure that the electrical is up to what it should be for standards. Where do we set those standards? That's a different, story, and stuff, and making sure that we're providing the safest possible, building for these people to live in and stuff like that. Again, when the occupants get in there, there needs to be an avenue for the owners to say, okay, hey, we got a complaint now. Fire department was in there. There's trash piled up in the basement. There's this or that, and there's critters running all over the place and bugs. Now, how do we go down that path? How do I file that complaint, or my guys file that complaint and stuff, and then we hold somebody accountable, and then
Complaint go to the zoning? Is that where it goes to, or?
probably would go to compliance for the basis of
Possibly.
Like unlivable conditions, and that go to, and they have
Health
children in
department.
the house, that goes to health department on.
Yeah.
child-
Yes. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And we've had to do that before. We've had to actually shut down. They had 6 different apartments in a building and stuff like that. And they had a sewer backup, and we had to go down and shut it down, and we pretty much remove everybody. And then the owner of the property had to kind of relocate them until we could get it remediated, and the health department had to go through their whole process.
In that case, we work with the fire department, the health department, zoning. They all go down and at the same time work together to try to at least
Jason,
make it better for the tenants.
you want to elaborate for the group what credentials the guy has to have on the fire department to do the inspections? And this idea of the training and certification came up early in this meeting. You want to go briefly through the process
Yeah, I mean,
and what
It's
the
a lot of fun.
credentials are?
So normally they'll go through about a 6-week training session. A lot of it will be 40 hours in class. They'll have a bunch of projects prior to, after, all these different things, stuff like that. And then you have to pass a very extensive test and everything else. And then once you get your certification, there's like 8 hours on an annual basis for continuing education and everything else. Now that's in order to get a certified state of Ohio inspector, for fire department,
Safety inspector.
fire safety inspector. Now you can get a different, a little bit lower level, certification that it's technically not a certification that you have to, per se do it, but you just can't do any citations at that point in time. But you can still do the same. As a hazard recognition officer, it's kind of the same thing. You could go in and say, oh, yep, exit light didn't work. You refer back as far as your citation or your, issues back to the inspector. The inspector would write the citation up, send it off to the owner of the property and stuff like that. So there's other avenues and stuff
If
like
you're
that.
denied access to a property where you've gotten a complaint or suspect an issue,
Yes,
do you not have the authority to gain
correct.
access?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
do
you
it
can.
either the easy way or the hard way.
Yeah.
Hey, you can't come in. Okay, I'll be back with papers.
Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
I can.
And obviously, if it's immediate, if we see that there is a direct safety violation, some type of life safety issue, we will, first and foremost, try to work with the owner, and stuff like that, and gain access and do so. If we are denied, we will get an administrative search warrant by the judge, and we will serve the warrant. It's funny you say that because I've done it a couple times in the last year. Not by what I would like to do. I always try to accommodate the property owners. I try to educate them. That's first and foremost. I think that the administration knows, especially Eric, that over the years I've tried to liaison between, owners, whether it's residential side of it all, commercial, business, whatever it is. It's just, you kind of have to have that person there to accommodate some of that stuff and to help. And it's the same thing like you guys are talking about, is letting them know what the process kind of is. It is very difficult. I agree with you 100%. If you've not seen the fire code or building code, it's pretty extensive, and it references NFPA standards that are 700-800 pages of size 8 font that even with my glasses I have a tough time with.
So your guys and you, I'm presuming, are very close to being a licensed home inspector under the Ohio Department of Commerce.
Our inspectors.
Maybe we're going down the wrong path. Maybe we already have them. We're probably not going to use
How many
them.
more do I get to hire?
Everybody keeps saying this probably isn't going to happen very often. And yeah, we probably do need somebody in zoning, but
That zoning needs help. They do. And it's the hardest part is getting it all together and organizing. And so you can go out there and find the issues and problems and get that going. It's now taking it to that level of we get some remediation and stuff like that and stuff. So sorry, I thought I was talking loud enough. So that we can get that done and completed, and then just like we were talking about, when it gets in here, where does it go and how can we get it to, type deal. That's our biggest thing. Now the fire code does hold a lot more, weight to it, and it's got a bigger bite for good reasons because it's life safety issues. But yes, by all means. And, but at the same time, when we're out on calls and we're going in these properties, the last thing we're there to do is go, now smoke detectors and stuff like that. By all means, we've done that. We've even come back and put them up for them, as needed and stuff. But, a lot of us, well, some of the older guys have skilled trades and stuff like that. Some of the newer ones, they'll be able to fix your computer and write your program like nothing. But as far as understanding building construction and plumbing and electrical and stuff like that, where someone my age has kind of has those skills, and we can look at it from that perspective and go, yep, I know this is wrong, so, and we do take building construction and stuff like that as part of our basic trainings and stuff. So, but no, I'm always here. We had a conversation. We're always having conversations. We work diligently in zoning meetings to try to get some of this stuff worked out and, and stuff, and try to get to some of these properties that we know we have some issues with. I will say that the more dilapidation, the more, building issues that we have, even on the residential side of it all, that's where we're getting some of our issues. That's where we're getting, the fires that are, occurring and the danger and stuff like that. And then it's also the occupants. General society is not getting any smarter. I hate to say that, but we try to pump out information, we try to let them know. I think that you guys need to lay this out with as much information as possible. I don't think you should hold back on that. I'd give them as much as possible. Let it be out there, you know, and they can go from there. You can, here's the packet, here's your thing, you know, here, you know, is it our responsibility to assist them with understanding the information? Yeah, by all means, but sometimes that might just be to directing them in the right, you know, location. Here it is. Here's your packet. You need to understand this. If you don't, come in and talk to zoning compliance, the fire department, you know,
Well,
you guys.
and I had someone say to me, maybe there has to be a lot more three-letter words explaining it. That could be part of the city section. If we're changing it, you know, if number 3 is a city section, that one's not hard to explain, but there's a few of them in there. Maybe we just need to make them a little easier to understand.
Yeah. This is not new by any stretch of the imagination anywhere. I've probably got 5 examples from other cities that are from 10 pages to 2 pages to referencing ones and stuff like that, from city Sandusky to up into Michigan and all over the place. So there's plenty of examples that you guys could use. There's even a section like for Columbus Fire that, well, they've got a whole bureau of inspectors and stuff like that go around and assist with some of the stuff that does residential, you know, side of it all and stuff. You know, essentially every building is subject to the fire code. It truly is that simple. You know, there's residential building code for a reason, you know, and then fire code does apply to it. If we see an imminent danger or some type of serious hazard, we have the right to use the fire code to assist us to get that rectified. Good.
Thank you.
Well, I think the mayor has done a great job in getting this thing cleaned up from where we started. And even Billy's here tonight, and he didn't say anything about registration, so he's got it now too.
I would have the entire new one, but I think we discussed.
But I just want to make sure that if we're going to run this through for 3 readings, if we don't have somebody on premise that can go out and do what we need to do, if there's 3 violations, then we need to table it until they get licensed, because I can't legitimately say I want to spend city money to enforce this when the whole principle of it is that we enforce it from within. So I hope she gets her license. I hope she's ready to go. But if she's not, I would prefer not to have it in force. Because we can table it indefinitely. We can read it for 3 readings. On the 3rd one, it can be tabled and left there till they're ready to go.
You know, Jeff Huber is credentialed as an inspector,
Yes.
so it's not like you don't have some people with some knowledge and authority.
No. I mean, but we're trying to get Danielle licensed, and she's not yet. So once she is, good to go.
So could Jeff Huber do inspections? I know his business right now is zoning.
He's not licensed.
Okay.
He's probably very knowledgeable because he came from the fire side.
He's a licensed fire safety
Yeah,
inspector.
Right, right,
Certified fire inspector.
right. This is probably almost like a step down from the fire inspector.
Above it. You got kind of the whole breakdown like we were talking about, utilities, what needs to be here, stuff like that.
Okay.
Structurals, all kind of fancy that's.
I had you guys on a pedestal there for a second.
Yes. We're already. Obvious stuff that we see. It's still gonna be difficult for this individual who doesn't, as far as getting the nuances of what's going on. Keeping it simple, keeping a base check. That's what those examples like I talked about. They got some nice basic checks and stuff like that. We can follow that program. I can assist whatever you guys need from us, you know, myself. More
administration, I'm sure will.
Yeah, we've all been working together to try to get this legislation to work.
Oh, and I guess one more question. The reason we have the ordinance for the international property maintenance code, that's because there's a new one and we're updating ours to,
We're just updating
Hear
it,
that.
the most recent edition.
Okay. It just seemed to coincide at the same time we're working on this, but that's how I took it.
Anybody have anything else? Deb?
Well, after closing the windows though, one quick thing.
Gotten stuffy. It has
Well-
gotten stuffy, yeah.
I know, but
Okay, Deb Tyson, 800 Woodward Avenue, Lot 9. I just had a question because I've heard the words. I did some research before I got here, and land bank was a new term, and I didn't see it before. I knew you were having this workshop. So if we're having a law, is land bank just, because I know that it gets funds from a grant or whatever, but is it something different? And,
It's entirely different, Deb, and it's actually off the purview of tonight's meeting
okay, that's,
because landlords and tenants can't exchange in the land bank.
okay, that's one. Then I'm glad to hear that. And the other is, are we, as a public, going to be able to see this once it actually becomes thing? Or is it just going to be only if you get in trouble, you get to see it?
It's public record, Deb, so once should be in its draft form, you have a right to access the full document in its draft form. And once it's passed, you still have the same citizen rights to access that document in its full entirety. And it will be, whenever it gets cycled through, it will be put online in the codified ordinance section of Fostoria in its entirety.
Okay, that's great. Other thing was, OSS has like a complaint thing, like I've been hearing, that I wondered if the city site could do something with this so that everything would join. If you're, when you make this to be, if it, yeah.
We can look into that, Deb. Thank you. What were you going to say, Mr. Podak? Sorry. What were you going to say about the windows being shut?
oh, just, it's off the subject, but I'll say it anyway. Tiffin, I think, has an ordinance about not blowing the train horns in town, don't they?
Yes, but they put millions of dollars into every crossing.
That's for a future meeting.
I knew there had to be.
Nothing to do with landlord tenant. Sorry.
I know it. I said that.
You wanted to say more, Mr. Sayer? Okay. Any objections?
Seen this, and I apologize, I should have made copies. Truly believe this is your fix-all on everything, Sue. I know
Yep, I've seen it.
but if anybody actually wants to take a look at that.
I filled them out myself.
I've seen them.
That on
Okay.
the website?
That is a genius thing that Jeff put together that I truly believe would solve all issues. I would have no qualms if that were to be included somehow. I would support the legislation, which sounds crazy to me. But I would, because it would solve all problems, because solve problems between, oh, I'm being targeted. It would solve problems between, you know, you're not going to be getting the frivolous ones that zoning does get. There are some where they probably get calls from the same person every day. Okay, fill out this form. Suddenly they don't want to call no more because they're like, it's not that big of a deal now. I got to go sign a paper. It's an actual solution that I don't know a town that's implemented something like that. I went down, I told Jeff, and when Don showed it to me, I thought it was genius. And I told Jeff he did awesome on it. It's a possible solution if it could be implemented somehow where I think you would solve all issues. Any issues in the zoning department, I truly think would be solved by that. I did have other questions as far as, not questions so much, but we had discussed the trash and if there was not a yard, if if they only have a front porch, where they're going to put it at. There are still some rentals in town that, you're talking under 500 square feet for a rental, and they have a little tiny porch and no yard. You're not allowed to set the hopper on the porch. Where does it go? You'll probably run into issues with that. And something else that is off topic that down the line might be discussed. I know I discussed it with you, Sue. I didn't discuss it with you, gentlemen. If you guys actually wanted more housing in town, they're doing things out west with ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And anybody who wants information on that, I can get it to you. I think that was about everything I had to say on it. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time on this. I know this is a special meeting and you guys aren't getting paid extra for this, so very, very much is appreciated for all you doing
Just
that.
to respond to you, the city did send out to us an update on
I-
that, and that was one of the little tweaks that they had done, that trash or garbage bins may not be stored on the front porch unless there is no side or backyard. I noticed that that was in the tenant obligations, but it didn't get updated in the landlords, so we would just want to make sure we,
And I know you updated the CO2.
yeah.
It's a work in progress. Like I said, this is not entirely a bad thing. This could be something really, really good. And I think if that is implemented, that would be leading the way for other towns. Fostoria is not following stuff. We're actually leading the way and saying this is a way this can be done. It solves so many problems. So many problems. So just something to think about. But I appreciate you all. Thank you.
So at the next,
Form be attached, Eric? Could that zoning form be attached to this?
we're going to ask if anybody else from the public wishes to
Okay.
speak. So we're not cutting anybody off. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Just introduce yourself and your address so we.
Serena Reese, East High Street. I just had a few questions. The first is, I hear you guys say this is going to be a criminal matter, but first of all, why would you change it to criminal? What's the purpose of that? Just wondering.
There are two forms. One is civil, one would go civil court and one would go to criminal court. Under Ohio Revised Code, it would go to civil court. And under Fostoria Ordinance, it would go to criminal court.
So at what point would it become criminal then?
When it goes to criminal court, it would be fined as a crime.
Okay, but I'm saying like, okay, you get 3 citations and then it's criminal, or at what point in the process does it
No,
become?
it would go to criminal court versus going to civil court. There are two different kinds of court.
Yeah, I understand that.
Under Ohio Revised Code, if our zoning inspector cites you under Ohio Revised Code, it goes to civil court.
Mm-hmm.
If we put the ordinance into Fostoria's ordinances, if we codify it under Fostoria ordinances, it becomes criminal and it goes to criminal court.
Automatically that happens. So anything,
Correct. If you're cited by a compliance officer in Fostoria under Ohio Revised Code, it goes to civil court and the fines go to Seneca County.
mm-hmm.
If it's codified under Fostoria Code, it goes to criminal court and the fines come to the city of Fostoria.
So any violation of Fostoria's ordinances is a criminal complaint?
Not necessarily, but you'd have to read the entire ordinances to make that statement.
I guess I just don't understand law, but okay.
Well, the fact is, currently under Ohio Revised Code, if you get cited and you get fined, Seneca County gets the money, Fostoria does not. If it gets codified under Fostoria ordinance and you get fined, the monies come to Fostoria. Mr. Podak just pointed out that we don't get any money back because if we find somebody under Ohio Revised Code, the money goes to Seneca County and we never see it again.
Right. I just don't understand how it becomes criminal. I guess that's just the law.
I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
Well,
I'm not
the
either.
ordinance in itself states that it would be a criminal misdemeanor.
I think we can all agree that that money should be staying in Fostoria.
Right.
And if we do that, then it will stay in Fostoria.
Yeah.
If we just
Yeah, that's,
leave it That's why I'm saying,
This.
there's some things we need to change in here to tweak them to make sure they're Fostoria stuff. And this is one of them. Make it a misdemeanor criminal charge, and then the money stays here. Because we're doing all the work here. You know, zoning's doing the work, courts are doing the work. If it gets to that, but we get none of the money. So we're just taking it from civil, turn it into criminal.
So say someone gets just one complaint, that's criminal.
No, that you
One
gotta have
complaint's
three
not
to
gonna
get
go
to
to
that
court.
point.
Oh, one, okay, all right, got it, okay, thank you. Let's see, what else? I agree with what you guys are talking about now, like, if there's already ordinances on the books, why, reinvent the wheel? So I agree with that. Let's see. I don't know if this is in the current draft of the legislation or not, but I know in the one that I saw, it mentioned the city paying for the inspections. Is that still the case or no?
City would be responsible for paying regardless.
Paying,
Inspector, you're gonna pay whether you hire an inspector from the outside or whether you employ an employee.
but I'm just wondering, why wouldn't the landlord be responsible for that cost instead of the city?
Well, that's a great idea. You want us to write that into the code?
I don't think the citizens should pay for it. If there's a landlord that's not taking care of his property and he's cited,
Is it included in her salary as far as, I mean, is it something she's gonna, sorry, Sam.
No.
Is it something to where, I mean, is it gonna be an additional charge as far as, or is it included is, I mean, obviously for PIS goes enough to get more training, I understand. But is it that included as, this is part of my responsibilities, but it's not gonna be an additional cost to the city?
No, I think they're, having that certification does give her a little bit of space to what's going on.
Serena, this might be helpful, but based upon what I'm reading, if I'm understanding it correctly, we're going to have 3 violations or 3 citations before
Correct.
the inspection. And the penalty for citations, that landlord is going to pay up to $250 for the first one. The second one would be up to $500. So the landlord is paying on these penalties as we go. So they're going to be invested. Hopefully, we'll never have to do, that will be a deterrent enough that the inspection would never be necessary. But if it is, they will be, looks like, could easily be $1,000 in.
oh, so that will already pay for the inspection. Okay.
Okay.
Has the courage to give the actual.
Right. That's going to come down to the court, but the penalties are there.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
And as long as they're criminal, they stay here.
Right, which is key.
What was that?
Most of the examples from other cities and stuff like that, the owner of the property pays for the inspection.
Okay,
Pays a fee of some sort. See, 15 to,
okay.
You say 1,500? Oh,
Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you all.
Anyone else wish to address from the public? There's only a couple of you that haven't yet, but. Okay. So next week when we meet, you guys will have to decide whether or not to pull that off the table. You guys have to decide what to do with it once it is. And then if it winds up getting killed, I would recommend that there's a committee that would be formed that meets, unless we already have another piece of legislation to introduce. But that committee should be meeting, and it sounds like there's more than probably 3 of you at this table that probably are interested in doing that. If that's the case, it should be basically billed as a committee meeting. It can be one of those ad hoc committees that will be, that we can tell Tammy to send it to the paper and you guys will have to meet as a public meeting. If there's 2 or less of you, you guys can meet with any of the city officials and have as much meeting as you want. It doesn't have to be public, but if there's 3 or more of you, it does have to be public. So, because you would constitute almost a quorum. So that would be my recommendations next week if, based on what would happen. So,
I would just say, if this group decides that they're going to write something new, then I would just ask that we do it promptly. I feel like a lot of people have put a lot of time into this. It's just gone around and around and around. I'd like to see closure around it. So I would just say, if that's the direction this group goes, that it's picked up promptly and turned around so we can start those 3 readings.
at this point, if there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move adjourn.
Second. We have a motion from Podak, a second from Baker. Consider that an adjournment of this work session at 7:11.